Good morning, everybody, and thank you for tuning in. Good morning from Arizona. We're expecting three-digit temperatures today, so it's going to be a hot one. Hopefully, it's all good where you are at. And today I'm going to speak about one of my favorite topics, which is the science of breathing. I give this lecture to our patients here on a monthly basis, and I know most everybody who's tuning in today and most of our patients engage in some sort of breathing technique, whether it's part of a group process or maybe you've gone to an app or even in yoga. And I ask the patients, I say, how many of you actually do breathing techniques as part of your therapy here? And most of them will raise their hand. And oftentimes I'll say, okay, so how many of you actually know why it works, right? And most of them don't. It's been my feeling that if we understood how breathing can reduce stress, not just a thing that we do because our psychotherapist tells us to do it, but it's actually something we can engage in to help reduce the physiological stress in our body. And if we understood the mechanisms behind that, chances are everyone would know, wait a minute, this is a tool in my stress strategy tool belt that I can use whenever I want to. And so that's the reason why I put this talk together. So bear with me. If I'm going to talk about stress and breath work, I'm going to have to talk a little bit about the nervous systems that are involved. It might be ad nauseum for most of you viewers today, but I have created this talk in a way that when I'm speaking with patients, it really helps them to understand a very complicated and complex process. So it's a simplistic way to understand the physiological system with stress, and hopefully you can get some tidbits out of it yourself that you can convey to your patients. So if there's a stress response, then there's also a relaxation response, and that's where the intentional breath technique can come in. So let's get started. So we have these wonderful nervous systems in our body, and the main nervous system that we all give credit to is our central nervous system, which basically is our brain and our spinal cord. There is one other major nervous system in the body known as the peripheral nervous system, and basically these are all of the nerves that are not as part of the central nervous system. Now, there are several nervous systems within the peripheral nervous system. The amazing thing about us animals is that we have this super communication highway where we have information coming down from the central nervous system through the spinal cord, communicating to the body. These are our efferent neurons. Likewise, a bottom-up process takes place where we have a cascade of information leaving the nervous system of the body and communicating back up to the brain. And of course, we can't forget the inner neurons, which are the nerves within the nerves that are helping the communication process. So when we think about the stress response, we need to tap into one of the nervous systems in the peripheral nervous system known as the autonomic nervous system. Now, this is the nervous system that controls all of our functions. Thank God something does, and we don't have to think about it, like breathing and digestion and our heart beating. The autonomic nervous system is also responsible for the energy in our body when we're very amped or when we're slumpy tired. So that's really important to note. How it interacts with the brain is what I tell all patients. We have this amazing brain that does a million things, but its number one job, believe it or not, is to perceive. And it perceives the outside world stimuli as it does listen to the inside world stimuli. So it's constantly on guard and paying attention, and then it goes into the cascade of the miracle that the brain is. So when we talk about the autonomic nervous system, I use this graphic that I love, and I've used this graphic for years, and many of my colleagues have stolen it from me, and that's fine, and you can steal it from me too. But this is a great way to show the autonomic nervous system and how it affects the organs of the body. Now, the energy of the body is balanced between this parasympathetic state, which is our low energy, or some refer to as the rest and digest state, and then we have the sympathetic aroused, which is the high energy, the action state. Now, this physiology wants to be balanced, and it's not just us humans, it's animals as well, right? And a balanced autonomic nervous system is what we call homeostasis. Now, homeostasis is achieved when we have a lot of this parasympathetic tone and just a little bit of the sympathetic tone. So characteristics of homeostasis are the prosodic heart rate, and prosodic meaning rhythmic heart rate. Our breathing is even. We have systemic blood flow. Fingers and tips and toes are nice and warm because blood is reaching to the far ends of our body. We're digesting our breakfast because blood flow is everywhere, so the vascular system is open when we're homeostatic. Psychophysiologically, we're responsive. We're not reactive, but more of a responsive nature, chill, if you will. We're resilient. There's a resiliency and a strength when we're homeostatic. We're also calm in our mind and alert. It's a really wonderful space to be in. If you're an athlete or you play golf or maybe sharpshooting, this is the zone that so many of us speak about. Okay, so this is a really good, healthy place to be. In fact, the name of the game for all animals is survival, first of all. So when we maintain homeostasis, we are actually living long, healthy, and happy lives, right? We're surviving for as long as we can, for as healthy as we can, and as happy as we can. That's homeostasis. Now, homeostasis really isn't static like the name implies. It's really more of this movement that takes place inside the autonomic nervous system. And many of us in the field refer to this as homeodynamic. And that's my preferred term as well, because there's a lot of movement here. So take note of this, because I'm going to return to this often throughout the talk. So what happens then when we are under some kind of threat, right? And this is where the brain perceives some kind of threat in the environment. And no, it does not have to be the proverbial saber-toothed tiger. It could be being stuck in a traffic jam late for a really important job interview. That's a threat, right? So there's demands on our daily life as well. So we have like deadlines that are due. And of course, there's always a sense of urgency as well. So this is like 21st century, 20th century living for many of us. So when the brain perceives some kind of threat, it's going to take this homeodynamic state and move us over to this high energy sympathetic state. So psychophysiologically, what's happening here is the brain perceives threat. And from there, it triggers the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis process, which is really releasing a variety of stress hormones into the body, right? What's happening there is those stress hormones are basically sending signals. It tells the heart to increase. It tells you to start breathing faster, and then it starts to tell the vascular changes to take place in the body. So what I mean by that is the vascular system in the fingertips, toes, and the entire activity of digestion clamps down, and then those vascular system opens up in the big muscle groups, so you get oxygenated blood to the big muscle groups, so you can fight what's threatening you, run from it, or freeze and hope to hell doesn't catch you. And that's your proverbial fight, flight, freeze. So fight, flight, freeze really isn't psychobabble. It's truly a sympathetic aroused state. Now, characteristics of stress response: fast heart rate, rapid breathing, like I just said. Many of us can get cold hands. Sometimes we get clammy hands. Clammy hands is not everybody has clammy hands, but some of us do it. It's a sign of stress. Muscle tightness, right? You're bracing, you're ready to fight whatever attacking you. And restricted digestion. So dry mouth, we just lose our appetite when we're highly stressed. Psychophysiologically, this is where we're feeling panicky, edgy. There may be anger, right? I could be driving my car and some idiot cuts me off, right? And I get agitated. That's the fight, flight, freeze response. Impulsivity can occur when we're at this state, so I might flip him the bird, something I wouldn't do normally, but if I'm in that agitated state, there you have it. And then high anxiety. So going back to the system and how the brain participates in the autonomic nervous system, the recovery part takes place when the brain perceives the threat is gone. Okay, so you made it to your job interview on time. Okay, we're good to go. The brain perceives the threat is gone, reabsorbing all of those stress hormones, and we go back into this homeodynamic homeostasis state, the relaxation response. So now we're living in this wonderful state of rhythm. We're responding to our environment. But now we have issues in our lives. And this is happening not to just our patients, but I think to everybody I know. And these are the constant demands for us to perform. Demands in our job, demands in our life. There are expectations. We have deadlines we have to meet. And now we have COVID, right? And we're living in a world of uncertainty, and it's chronic and it's constant. A lot of us are worrying more than we have ever had before. And some of us are even dealing with job loss. So we have a lot of these stresses that are coming down on us right now in this time. And so what's happening here is we may not be moving into high fight, flight, freeze mode, but we're moving somewhere a little bit more left of center, where we're chronically dealing with a lot of the sympathetic and just a little of the parasympathetic. And that, my friends, is chronic stress. So chronic stress characteristics are high blood pressure, hypertension, respiratory issues like asthma. Believe it or not, asthma is related to stress. We can have vascular issues. Remember, we're not getting blood flow to the fingertips and toes into the gut. So Raynaud's is actually a condition of stress. Muscle tension, right? Nothing feels better than getting a massage on my shoulders, let me tell you. And then GI issues. Again, blood is not going to the gut, so we start to have problems in our digestion. Psychophysiologically, we're intolerant, we're impatient, maybe irritable, really short-fused. It doesn't take much to push us over. And this is where we see anxiety, agitation. So what happens here is the body starts to break down when we're stuck in chronic stress. Remember, the goal of our existence is survival, long, healthy, happy life. Well, right now, when we're stuck in chronic stress, it is not a healthy life. Hans Selye was an amazing researcher of stress in the 50s, and he was studying the effects of chronic stress on the body. And he didn't call this chronic stress, but he called it the stage of resistance. And what we've learned is that if the animal cannot get out of chronic stress and go back to homeostasis, over time, the body's going to take over, flip the switch, and move us into an overactive parasympathetic state, which he called stage of exhaustion, I call crash. Now, the characteristics of an overactive parasympathetic is when we're exhausted, we're fatigued, burnout. And let me tell you, when I give this lecture, so many patients are like, yep, that's me, right? They just go, 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 go to the point of just burning out. Psychophysiologically, our motivation is tanked. We really don't have much interest in other things because it takes energy to have interest, and there you have your depression. I do want to let you know that we don't go into overactive parasympathetic as part of our normal movement and rhythm with the world. It is there that we go when we're chronically stressed for too long. It's a recovery state, and it really is the beauty of the body trying to compensate, and in this case, an overcompensation. So how do we get ourselves back into this homeostatic, homeodynamic state? Well, let's look at my wonderful little graph here, and let's identify two of the main organs that we can tap into to help us with a bottom-up process, and that's our heart and our lung, right? So let's look at this a little closer. When I spoke about the characteristics of homeostasis, I talked about prosodic heart rate and even breathing. So let's go and look at that. So if we look at our lungs, I'm going to characterize the rhythm of breathing on a sine wave for you. So just go with me on this. So in this instance, when we're taking a breath in, inhalation goes up on my little graph. When we're exhaling, it goes down. One of the things we know to be true about our autonomic nervous system is when the animal is inhaling, it's associated with the sympathetic tone. And again, when we're exhaling, it's associated with the parasympathetic. Pretty cool, huh? Now, the heart is, and this is what we call resonance frequency. Don't want to forget that, but this is a term we use in biofeedback called resonance frequency, is the rhythm of breathing. The heart now, in its beautiful nature of beating, also falls into its own little rhythm cycle. Let me explain that to you. So in this particular graph, I'm going to outline a heart rate of 60 beats a minute. Okay, so 60 beats a minute, that's 1 beat per second, right? 60 seconds in a minute. So if I was having a resting heart rate of 60 beats a minute, likely it would look like something like this, right? 1 beat per second. But my friends, that's actually not ideal, and that's not the way the heart is designed. In fact, that's called an attenuated heart rate, which has been correlated with heart disease, anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. The heart naturally beats rhythmically, just like we saw with the breathing. And in this case, when the heart is increasing in speed, it's quickening, again, it is correlated to the sympathetic tone of the autonomic nervous system. And likewise, when it's slowing down, parasympathetic. And this is what we call heart rate variability in biofeedback. If you've been interested in studying heart rate variability or HRV biofeedback, I highly encourage you to look into it. It really does work. There have been droves of research to show its effect on reducing depression, anxiety, and symptoms of PTSD. So what would happen in those instances when our breathing and our heart rate were doing the same rhythm? So we're breathing in, heart rate is going up, we're exhaling, heart rate is going down. When this occurs, this is something we call coherence. And remember the movement I was showing you about the autonomic nervous system, and now I'm showing you about this rhythm that we have with the heart rate and the breath going up and down, a little sympathetic, a little parasympathetic. Do you see how this is more of a rhythmic flow, right? So when you're coherent, you are homeostatic, and that's the good news. So what do we do then in issues where we have been chronically stressed for too long? So what I want to do here and share with you today is how do we use the breath to reduce stress? So let's go back to our intentional breath work here. And I'm going to introduce to you today a favorite breath work that we do. In this case, we're going to spend a little time breathing in and a lot more time exhaling. So a little time breathing in and a lot more time exhaling. And you see what's happening there. If I'm going to spend more time in the parasympathetic and less time in the sympathetic, what do you think is going to happen, right? Well, number one, what we can tell you is going to happen is that your heart, over time, after maybe one or two of these breaths, is going to start following the breath pattern. You become coherent, and little by little, you are pulling your body out of this stuck sympathetic aroused state and into homeostasis. And that is really how breathing works. It's pretty cool, right? So this really is part of the bottom-up process where we start to engage in a breathing technique, and it's sending signals back up to the spinal cord, to the brain, that, hey, you know what, brain? There ain't no stress down here. Brain's like, oh, okay, great, and then starts to reabsorb stress hormones. So with the time I've got, let's do some breath work together. And I'm sharing this screen with you here because I think it's very important to identify a few techniques first when we're going to be doing breath work. And the first one is to get out of your chest and use your diaphragm. Now, the diaphragm is a very large muscle. It wraps around the body. Not only can you pooch it out, but you can also expand it to the side. Now, a lot of folks think that they take a deep breath when they're stretching their clavicular area here, these intercostal muscles. And these muscles here, my friends, are tiny muscles. They're not designed to stretch. It's the diaphragm. So we want to get out of the chest altogether and breathe diaphragmically. Along that, you want the breath to be full but gentle. So no big pressured breathing, right? It's nice and gentle and full. Pressured breathing is a trigger of stress, so keep it gentle. For the uninitiated, I always say breathe in through your nose if you can, and then exhale through pursed lips. And so you're blowing out the air, but you're really controlling that outflow. And if you're doing a long exhale, that's really ideal, so you can really keep that long count going. And the last thing is no more than 2 minutes at a time. These are techniques. This is not normal breathing. And oftentimes the exchange of CO2 and oxygen varies, and so you never want to go more than the 2-minute max. Most of the time, those are going to be 8 technique breaths, usually at about 2 minutes. So let's do one of my favorite breath techniques. I stole this from the autogenetics protocol, which is a breathing warm-up. I've called it the 1-to-2 ratio breath, because basically what that means is for whatever you breathe in, you simply double count your exhale. And so for today, what we're going to do is we're going to breathe in gently for 3 seconds, use the diaphragm, right? And then exhale for 6 seconds. And we're going to do that 8 times. Now, for some of you studs out there, you may want to go bigger, which is fine with me. So that would be something like a 4-second inhale or an 8-second exhale. Now, you can start out small, 2 seconds in, 4 seconds out, whatever works for you. So are you ready to go and start with me? I hope you are. So I'm going to play a little bit of music here because it was requested that I do that. And while I'm getting that part set up, I want you to go ahead and get yourself comfortable. And I'm just going to guide you on this breathing technique. Now, if you want to put your hand on your chest and one on the diaphragm to make sure your chest isn't rising, that's great. And if you don't want to do that, you don't have to do that either. Okay, so are you ready? I'm ready. So beginning now, we're going to breathe in for 1, 2, 3. Exhaling, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Breathe in 1, 2, 3. Exhaling, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nice and smooth. 1, 2, 3. Exhaling, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Breathe in 1, 2, 3. Exhaling, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I want you to go ahead and continue that breath on your own, just following the 3-6 pattern, however it feels for you. And if you haven't closed your eyes already, go ahead and close them now. Just listen quietly to the sound of my voice. And with your eyes closed, I would like you to imagine your heart in your mind's eye. It can take any shape that you want it to take. And as you imagine your heart, what I want you to do now is begin breathing through your heart, as if your heart were breathing. Experiencing your breath as it flows in and then out of your own heart. Breathing like this as if it were even more smooth, more gentle. And now allowing your breath simply just to be, allowing your body just to breathe itself. And all you have to do in this moment is watch that breath. Noticing how your abdomen gently rises and falls with each breath in and out. And perhaps being curious about the sensation of air as it flows in and then out through your nose. And somehow you're curious how the air is so cool when it flows in, so much warmer when it flows out. And when you're ready, you can just go ahead and bring yourself back to our little presentation today. Just bringing yourself ready to start the day or halfway through the day, wherever you are. And with that, I will say thank you and end with a quote from Dr. Andrew Weil, where he said, "There is no limit to what working with the breath can accomplish. Breathing well may be the master key to good health." And I couldn't agree more. So with that, I will go ahead and answer some questions, and we'll see what I've got over here, if I can see it. Someone says, should we be practicing breathing exercises daily? Would this help us better manage future stressful situations? Yes, absolutely. I would encourage daily morning breath and an evening breath. So that 1-to-2 ratio breathing that I just showed you is an excellent breath technique to use to help to fall asleep, especially when you have a chattery mind, right? Your body's exhausted, you're tired, and you lay down and you say, okay, I'm going to do this 1-to-2 ratio breath. And what's happening is you're relaxing the body, you're pulling it out of sympathetic tone. And while you're doing that, you're counting. And your brain, as miraculous as it can be, can only have one thought at a time. So it's counting the breath, and you're relaxing, so it can really help. And then if you do that habitually, that could really be beneficial to a regular sleep cycle. Likewise, there are energizing breaths that you can do to help boost your energy. So if you're feeling a little sluggish, there are techniques where you can hold your breath for a little bit. And sometimes I give those to patients in the morning. So one of our favorites is something called 4, 5, 6. And that's a 4-second inhale, 5-second hold, and a 6-second exhale. And that helps to sort of balance the body a little bit more. It gives us a little bit more energy, because if you think about it, that's 9 seconds in a sympathetic tone and only 6 seconds in the exhale. So I think so, yes. And if you do any heart rate variability biofeedback, that's a lot of respiration training. And that itself will condition the body to become more resilient, more homeostatic as its normal state. So yes, to your question. I'll take another one here. I hope I have 4 minutes. I did really well with time, didn't I? Would this be suitable for trauma? Absolutely. PTSD is a chronic stress state. What more can I say? When we have symptoms of PTSD, we are braced, fight, flight, freeze, right? We are waiting for shoes to drop. There's a hypervigilance, hyperarousal to our energy. And when we learn to move that physiology out of that chronic stress state, you are changing the physiology, which is then sending signals. Now, there are more afferent neurons going up the spinal cord, the vagus, to the limbic system than there are efferent neurons coming down. So your brain takes more direction from your body than it gives it. It always makes me wonder who's really in charge. So when you have PTSD or chronic stress and you practice this work, you are constantly sending signals upward to the brain that there is no danger. It changes brain chemistry. So over time, we can really make a shift in that state. Now, this is only part of the solution. There's so many more other things that we need to be doing to deal with PTSD, but this is one of those practices you can do. Oh, is it for energy or calming? Yes, I just talked about that, didn't I? Okay. Okay, there's a comment by Richard Brown, a psychiatrist at Columbia, and the Breath, Body, Mind book, which talks about coherent breathing. There you have it. See, it's just not me. All right. Let's see here. How should the 4-7-8 breathing tech be used? Okay, that is an Andrew Wheel technique, and that's 4 seconds in, second 7 hold, and 8-second exhale. It's not for everybody. That is a very long breath. That is a 19-second breath. And that is a long time to be holding your breath. Not everyone would be equipped at doing that. And I would start out slow. I would take pieces of that off. My recommendation for techniques you might have heard about or read about or participated in is, if you have an opportunity to be hooked up into a biofeedback device, find out if it actually does help your physiology. That's the only way you're going to really find out, other than the sense of it feeling good. And with that, I think my time is up. I hope you've enjoyed this time. And please send me additional questions if you have. I'm reached here at Sierra Tucson. Thank you so much.